I don't think I have ever met a person that doesn't love croissants. And so to call this a crowd pleaser is an understatement. I'm Nancy Silverton, and I'm the co-founder of the Mozza Group. I have restaurants on the corner of Highland and Melrose. I have Pizzeria Mozza, Osteria Mozza, and Key Spacca. I'm here to show you one of my favorite desserts. Growing up in Los Angeles, I think the only pastries that were ever on my table, or I think I even ate at other people's houses, were pastries from Jewish bakeries.
It's impossible to overstate the influence that Nancy Silverton has had over some of the most prominent aspects of Los Angeles dining culture. Desserts created around seasonal fruits that graft rustic and refined sensibilities, the advent of complex European-style breads, our love of Italian restaurants, and the creative liberties we take with that cuisine.
When I went to work at Michael's, and I started first on a computer. It was a job that I was not suited for because it involved pressing buttons. I went in to apply for a job there, and according to the manager, that was the only job available in the restaurant. But when Jonathan, who was the chef, got word of that's not why I was there, was to be a cashier, he brought me into the kitchen, but in pastries. It was a great example of the cards being in the right place for me.
Silverton is a native of Los Angeles, gaining national prominence as Wolfgang Puck's pastry chef at Spago in the 1980s.
So when I went to Spago, I not only wanted to create my own desserts, but I also wanted to make them a little bit more composed. I didn't know that was going to be my signature. It was just something that I knew that I wanted to do because I wanted to make the dessert program there my own.
And then in 1989, she and her then husband, the late Mark Peel, started Campanile. It was the restaurant that seemed to codify some of the notions about Southern California cooking. The sense of seasonality, the interplay of culinary influences from around the Mediterranean, the prominence of the grill, and the absolute need for freshness and lightness in our desserts. With her 3 Mozza restaurants, she recalibrated her talents around Italian food, and diners had a chance to taste more broadly her obsession for ingredients and the rewards of her perfectionism around things like pizza dough and pasta shapes.
If you were to ask anybody, so where do you think the best pizza in the world is? People would say, and I'm not saying today, but I'm just saying in general, people would say, oh, New York, or they would say Chicago, or they would say Naples, right? Or they would, Neapolitan pizza. None of which I was really a fan of. So what I was a fan of Chris Bianca's, is that it was something different that somebody was making because they were making in their own style. And that's what I wanted to do. So I think what's different about today's pizza making is that everybody realizes the importance of both the bottom and the top.
She's an international brand now and seemingly gifted with near inexhaustible energy in her 60s. But the influence of her Italian restaurants and with her sensibilities around flavors that we love so much here continues to set a bar of excellence in Los Angeles.
It's a bakery dessert that I discovered years ago when I went to pastry school in France. I walked into a shop, and in the case were a lot of things that I recognized, and then there were a few things that I didn't recognize. And one of them was this, I didn't know it was a croissant at the time, but this pastry that was covered in almonds and dusted in powdered sugar, and it wasn't beautiful because it wasn't beautiful in the French sense of the perfected, very precise looking dessert, but it was more something that was homey and rustic, and I could just tell it tasted delicious. You know, look, at a croissant is not an easy thing to make at home. It's not easy to make at home because it is something that takes, you need to have a kitchen where you have a lot of space, where you can roll out a yeasted dough, incorporate butter into it, roll up that dough, fold it, roll it out again, and do that 3 to 4 times depending upon what style of croissant you're making. And then you need to shape it, and then you need to proof it, and then you need to refrigerate it, and then you need to bake it, and kind of on and on and on and on. It's an intimidating thing to make. Recently, I realized that I don't need to do the most difficult part of this dessert anymore, that there's plenty of bakers out there that will do it for me. So let's start out with making the sugar syrup that I'm going to soak my croissant in. So this is a pretty standard sugar syrup. It's made with water, sugar that I'm going to bring to a boil, along with some orange blossom water and some vanilla bean paste. Because the seeds of the pod are incorporated into it, you see all the beautiful seeds in the final product. I'm going to let it boil for about a minute just to make sure all the sugar is dissolved, and then I'm going to shut it off. And meanwhile, I'm going to make my almond cream. So I'm going to start off with adding almond paste into my mixer, and I have the paddle attachment to it. So I'm going to cream that almond paste with some granulated sugar, a pinch of salt, and once this is broken down, I'm going to add my butter. And continue mixing. All right, that's mixed up well. I'm going to add my almond meal, and by the way, this is just ground almonds, and again, I really prefer the skins of the almonds, and so the almond meal or the almond flour that I chose is called unblanched, and that means that the skin is still on. And then lastly, I have 2 whole eggs, and I have a little bit of white rum and almond extract, and I'm going to whisk that together. And so slowly, we're going to incorporate the liquids into my butter. So with a serrated knife, we're just going to cut these croissants in half horizontally. So with a pastry brush, you need to soak it in this very flavorful and also very aromatic sugar syrup, which is flavored with that orange flower water. So slather that almond cream onto the pastry. And you know, I love when you're constructing something or constructing a dessert where it really is something that you don't have to be so careful with, say like piping a rosette, something like that, where there's so much technique involved that it's intimidating. And just put it back together, and then we're going to slather some more of that almond cream on top. And now I'm going to top them with my lightly toasted sliced almonds and pile them up on top in a fairly even single layer, because if you pile them up too high, the almonds, they won't cook. So into a fairly hot oven, I'm putting these in at 375. And they're done when they're just well colored, toasty, and they smell like you can't resist letting them cool before you eat them. Okay, so people always ask me, what's my preference? Do I like the sweet version of the twice-baked croissant, or do I like the salty, savory version? And I gotta say, I can't decide. I love them both. I think both of them make great snacks. Again, start off with a pre-made croissant. Don't torture yourself by thinking you have to make that croissant at home. And whereas in the sweet version, we made an almond cream, in the savory version, I'm gonna fill with the bechamel, gruyere cheese, and prosciutto. So to make the bechamel, we're melting some unsalted butter, and I'm going to add some sliced onion and just cook it gently to soften that onion. Now I'm going to be straining the onion out, but what I want to do is I want to flavor my bechamel with the flavor of onion. Now if we were going to add my cheese to the sauce rather than layering it in, I would have a Mornay, and it would still be delicious, but what I would not have is the look of the cheese melting in as well, because it would be mixed in with my bechamel. So once my onions are softened just like that, again, no color, off the heat, sprinkle in all-purpose flour, and then combine that with the onions and butter. We're going to cook it a little bit over the heat to cook out the raw flavor of the flour. And once that flour is cooked out, I'm going to add my whole milk and scrape up all the bits of flour. Switch from a spatula to a whisk, and I'm going to whisk until my milk thickens. 1 fresh bay leaf and a chili d'arbol to give it just a little bit of heat to it. Now I'm going to hold off with my last 2 seasonings, which are salt and nutmeg, till after I strain this mixture, because I don't want to lose any of the nutmeg or the salt into the strainer. All right, I'm going to add my salt and my nutmeg and whisk that in. A bit of taste. Oh, I can add all that salt. At first it looked like it was too much. And then I need to let this cool. So, you know, whenever I walk into a bakery, whenever I eat at a restaurant, besides trying to enjoy myself and have a good time, which I do, but I always try to find something that I take away that changes something or adds to something that I already do. So whereas with the almond croissant, I sliced it in half and filled it in a traditional horizontal way, pretty recently I went to a place and I looked at their ham and cheese croissant, and I noticed that it wasn't filled in that way. It was filled from above by just cutting into it and opening it up and filling it that way. And I really liked the look, and I liked the idea that the sweet one I fill in the traditional horizontal way, and this one I fill from on top. So open up your croissant and spoon in the bechamel. So don't worry that it oozes out. Open it up, stuff in some grated gruyere, crumple in a little bit of prosciutto, let it hang out, spoon in a little bit more bechamel. And what this bechamel does is it just makes the whole eating experience of this croissant so much more luscious. Fresh thyme and a little bit of coarsely ground black pepper. And I'm going to pop it into the oven and bake it until it's nice and brown. You know, great color means caramelization. Great color means flavor. And that's how I want these croissants to look. Okay, so here's my almond croissant, the first one out. And for this one, I'm just going to add some powdered sugar. And to the ham and cheese, nothing on top because I baked it with the thyme, the black pepper. You can smell it. Don't need to do anything to it. Now look, you could either serve these by themselves, as I'm going to do, or on a big platter. Serve the almond on one side and the ham and cheese on the other. But two great versions of a twice-baked croissant, being able to utilize a professional's skills, meaning a professional bakery where they made those croissants, and turn it into a very simple but a very delicious and complex pastry, both a sweet version and a savory version. So every book I've written since desserts, which is my first one, up to this one, which I think is my 10th, if I'm counting correctly, each one was not really planned. It was like, oh, I have an idea. I should do a bread book. Or I love the idea of twist of the wrist. And my sandwich book, I should make a sandwich book, you know. So this book came about after making one cookie, which was a peanut butter cookie, that I was so charmed by what I did to tweak this peanut butter cookie, but still stay within the definition of what a peanut butter cookie is. So I didn't add any weird things to it. I wasn't that creative. I just did a little bit of tweaking and got some more peanut butter flavor in it. It got me thinking, that is the kind of book that I would like to have. Somebody that gives the thought and the focus and the attention to honing in on all the basic of basic recipes. So whether it's a pound cake or a streusel coffee cake or a blueberry muffin, whatever it is, whatever is familiar, what we really want to eat and what we really want to make in our own home kitchens, but do whatever it takes to fix what might be lacking. A blueberry muffin that's too sweet or is only all white flour, or you know, things like that. Just little things that make the simplest combination better.